Welcome everyone to the second ever Weekly Mailbox, the weekly Q&A over here on the F1 Reviews channel. We got 5 fantastic questions once again this week, so as I'll say straight from the go, if you've got any questions for me, chuck them down in the comments below. Maybe next week your question will be in the Weekly Mailbox. But let's just get stuck into it, right, shall we? So the first question then comes from David Pesha, and it's a pretty simple question, and it's, what is your favourite race of the history of F1? So, what's my favourite race of all time? Very, very difficult question to answer, of course. Just off the top of my head, obviously, Brazil 2008, a fantastic race. That's springing to mind straight from the go. We've also got Canada 2011. That one was completely insane. That whole race. That one loses some points for me because I didn't actually see it live at the time. It was a very late one and I was fairly young, so I actually watched it the next day, so it didn't quite have the same effect, but still a fantastic race, and that will go down as fantastic for sure. The first ever race I can remember, my earliest memory, the 2006 Hungarian Grand Prix. That was a great race, Jenson Button's first ever win. We've also got 2012 Abu Dhabi. Being a Lotus fan, that for me meant so much. Kimi Raikkonen getting his first win for Lotus, and that was a real fantastic weekend. Then as well, the final race of the season, Brazil 2012, that was a fantastic race and all. We've also had, in the hybrid era, Bahrain 2014, that was a fantastic race. I think up there with the best of the hybrid era. We also got Baku from last year. That was a fantastic race. And we also had, was it 2015 Hungary? I believe it was, where Sebastian Vettel won. And an awful weekend for Hamilton and Rosberg, but that was also a great race. But for me, I know there's only one real answer. Well, actually there's two. And one is Silverstone 2017, because it was the first time I went to Silverstone to see Formula 1 in England, which was fantastic. But the one that I could go back and do again, Spa 2015. My first ever race, seeing it live in the flesh. Fantastic, it really was. And probably for all you guys, it probably wasn't a memorable race. But not only, like I say, was it my first ever race, it was Lotus's last ever podium in Formula 1. They had a torrid season. No podiums for the previous 2 seasons. Going horrendously. It was my first ever race weekend, like I say. Went out to Spa, and Grosjean literally put on the performance of his career. It was fantastic to see. I think it was 4th in qualifying, then he had a 5-place grid penalty. He fought back in the race. He was 4th. It was incredible that he got to 4th in the race. Vettel's tyre exploded right at the end, and yeah, it was an amazing weekend to be there and be part of. And so for me, personally, my favourite race of all time, Spa 2015. The second question of the week comes from Michael B, and he asks, do you think new engine suppliers and teams will come in 2021, and if so, what teams or suppliers? So what he's asking here is, in regard to the 2021 regulations, when there's a big mix-up, do I think any new teams or suppliers will come into the sport? And I think 100% yes is my answer. I think before 2021 we'll have had more F1 changes in teams, and if I was to hazard a guess, I think engine supplier, I think Aston Martin will have made more of a step. They're obviously looking at it at the moment, and I think either they'll be Red Bull's engine supplier or they'll have completely taken over the Red Bull team, would be a guess there. I also think that Force India will no longer be on the grid. I think that's pretty much a given. And it would not surprise me if we saw Toro Rosso or Williams drop out the sport, actually. Williams, obviously, a lot of history, but something massive's got to happen to them, or else they're just going to dip right to the back of the field, and it could be a very difficult time for the British team. So, anyone else I can think of off the top of my head? Maybe Haas. In my Haas video about if they will ever win the World Championship, I did say that if they do want to make a big push, they're going to have to change engine supplier. They're going to have to get their own engine supplier, because Ferrari, there's no way they'll let Haas be right up there with them if they're going to be challenging for the title. You know, Ferrari will find some little loophole which makes that possible. So, again, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw Ford enter the sport, or Chevrolet was what I was going to say. Chevrolet or Ford is what I said in my video. I think that's very possible, but I definitely think you're looking at Aston Martin, pretty much 100% coming into Formula 1, and Force India pretty much 100% leaving. If I was to hazard a guess of a random team joining, or someone obviously I'd love Lotus to come back. I think that's very, very unrealistic. But we could see Audi. I think everyone would love to see Audi. Everyone, I think, would love to see Jaguar. The only thing there is that they're obviously pushing a lot with their Formula E programme. But if that goes well, then they could reconsider doing a Formula 1 team as well. But that's the more important thing, is that a lot of teams are looking at Formula E rather than Formula 1. So that's going to be the big issue here. But like I say, I think Aston Martin by 2021 will be definitely in the sport, and Force India will definitely be gone. MC Claw Larson asks, what is Perez's future in F1? Does he have a shot at Kimi's seat? Good question. Something that sort of I answered in the Who Will Replace Kimi Raikkonen video, but I've still picked this question because I think it's more interesting to see the future of Sergio Perez. I think this is a great question, very broad. Obviously, Force India have taken a backward step this season, and I do think they will struggle to get back to 4th place. I do believe that. So what does that mean for Perez? Obviously, many people think that he is a top driver and should definitely be in contention for the Ferrari seat. I don't 100% agree with that. I think he does have tendencies to lose his cool a bit, and I don't think it was right that McLaren got rid of him so quick. That was wrong. But it could be argued that that was his chance. You know, he's had it, and it's gone. And Ocon didn't outperform him this weekend, which for Perez was a good thing. But I think, especially for that Ferrari seat, there's much better options. And he's going to find it hard to find a seat. If I was to hazard a guess of... I'm saying that phrase a lot today. But if I was going to have a guess of Perez's next step, I would say he'll be on his way to Haas. I think that would be a good little step for Perez. Arguably now a forward step, but could also be seen as a side step. I don't think there's going to be a place at Mercedes available to him. Red Bull, Ferrari, not for Perez. I don't think any of those teams will take in Perez. You're then looking at McLaren, who I doubt would take another shot on him, and I doubt Perez would want to go back there. You've then got Renault, which could happen, especially if the driver market means that Ricciardo leaves Red Bull and Sainz goes back to Red Bull, and Renault need a space, so Renault could need a driver. But I think Grosjean will move to Ferrari at the end of the season. I think that's almost a given. In my opinion, I think that's very likely to happen, and I think that would mean Perez could fit in with Haas. I think that would be quite a nice little team-up as well. Perez at Haas, and Perez and Magnussen I think would be a very solid lineup, and so would fit their sort of bill they're looking for definitely. So Perez, his future in F1, I don't think he'll be winning any races, to be honest, in his career, which is probably a bit gutted for him. I think he's probably peaked already, which again is probably a bit gutting for him if that is true. But I think you're looking at Haas as his most likely next destination, and Renault also. Those two would be the two that I would be considering Perez for in the future. Right, 2 more questions to go then, and to be honest, they're not too dissimilar. And the first question from the F1 nerd, great guy, always shows support for the channel, which is fantastic. Thank you very much, dude. His question sort of leads into the next one, and the F1 nerd asks, do you think Haas can stay competitive across the course of this season? My answer is yes, I do think they will this season. I don't think that Melbourne was a fluke. They did seem to be quicker than the Renaults and the McLarens. They definitely seem to be that 4th place team, and I think they'll be pretty much there for the whole season. I think perhaps on more aero tracks, slower speed tracks like Monaco, perhaps then they won't be quite so high up. We obviously don't know how good that chassis is. I think perhaps then you'll see the likes of McLaren perhaps overtake them. But I think across the whole season, yes, I think Haas will be right there. And now that leads on to the F1 Game of Fives question, and that is, how do you think the season will pan out? Will Ferrari drop off in pace at the end of the season again? So, first of all, I don't think at the end of last season, in my opinion, Ferrari's pace did drop off. I think reliability obviously was a big thing for them, and they weren't major reliability issues every time. Obviously in Japan, it was a tiny wheel nut that was the issue there, I'm pretty sure. Something very similar anyway, and we're talking a tenner to buy, you know, and that cost them the race. Singapore, you can't blame that on reliability. So I think Ferrari, at the end of last season, their pace didn't drop off. But to answer the main meat of this question, how do I think the season will pan out? And I'm going to answer this question in terms of the teams. I think that's what you want here, and that'll link with the F1 Nerds question. And my answer to this is Mercedes will be the top team. They look very quick this weekend, only got caught out by the VCS, and obviously we had those issues with Mercedes and their technology, which is not the best thing to be omitting from Mercedes. But Hamilton looked in a league of his own this weekend, qualifying, and it could be argued that Kimi was with him. It was very difficult to tell. A lot of management seemed to be going on this weekend, which was a shame, to be perfectly honest with you. But yeah, I think Mercedes will be the top team. But I think then the next team, it was difficult to tell. Red Bull didn't appear to me to be the second best team. They didn't get good qualifying laps done, and they struggled to overtake the Haas cars. So again, it was difficult to see there. But I think what will happen is Ferrari and Mercedes, I think Ferrari will catch up with Mercedes a little bit. They seem to really want it this year, and although they seem on the back foot to start off with, they've got to win, and that will give them positive pressure moving forward and motivation. So I think Ferrari will catch up to Mercedes. Red Bull, I think they're going to struggle this year, and I think there'll be a messy breakup with Daniel Ricciardo. I can see that happening, I really can. So I think they'll be third for most of the season. Haas, I think, will stay pretty much fourth across the season, and I think potentially could catch up with Red Bull. The same with McLaren. I think McLaren could be the biggest improving team over the whole season. I think they'll start off like they are now, low-end top 10, but I think they'll end the season pretty much in the midfield of the points, pretty much on a consistent basis, and fighting for podiums. I think at the end of the season, they'll definitely have caught up. The same with Renault, I think. So I think really, at the end of the season, we'll have the main group in the front, which will be Ferrari and Mercedes, and I think the secondary group will be Red Bull, Haas, McLaren and Renault. I really think those four teams will be in the secondary group, which for Red Bull wouldn't be great, but they are going to pretty much have to be on the R&D straight away. But again, we've only seen one race, and testing, not really enough to show us anything, but I'm just having a pretty rough guess. I think Force India, they'll pretty much be going nowhere. I think they'll be best of the rest, picking up points here and there if there's a big crash or people retiring. I then think after them, I think Alfa Sauber will come into their own. I really do. Toros, I think, will have issues all season with that Honda engine. And Williams, I think, will be here some races and not the next. I really do think that'll be the case. I think on tracks like Monza, they'll probably be thereabouts. Baku, thereabouts. But then on street circuits such as Australia, Monaco, Hungary, they'll be nowhere. So Williams, it'll be very, very difficult here, there, everywhere across the whole season. But that would be my pecking order and how I see things panning out. And I think if we're going to look at it with a clear picture, Hamilton will have won this World Championship by perhaps the USA Grand Prix again, perhaps even earlier this year. I really do think this is going to be his biggest year of domination in the sport. And so that rounds up the Weekly Mailbox. The second week of the Weekly Mailbox is done. Another great week for your questions. I'm going to pick 5 every week, and if your question wasn't picked this week, I have kept some back because there were loads to choose from this week, but these were just some of the ones that I was itching to answer. And so that's done there. I have made a Twitter account. Some people were asking me about if I had Twitter and stuff, and it's something that I've never really used, I've never really got used to, but I've decided let's just do it. Let's just see how it goes. So that's going to be up on the screen now. The links to that'll be in the description as well. So I suppose, do you follow people on Twitter? I suppose you do, so you can follow me if you like. Tweet me as well. I don't really know, but I'm sure I'll get the grips with it. Also, I'm considering making a Patreon, something that I've considered. I don't know how I feel about that, but I might be making that in the next few weeks. And also, I might be doing some F1 open lobbies over on the Xbox, so I might make a Xbox group. My gaming tag is ChipKing99. If any of you were interested, you can add me. And if you ever fancy coming on and playing some F1, you can do. And I think that's all. Like I say every week, if you've got any questions, chuck them down in the comments below so I can answer in next week's Weekly Mailbox. Hopefully you have enjoyed. Hopefully you didn't find my answers too infuriating and ragey. But guys, like I say, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the next one.